In China, the story of the cross once seemed as strange and as far away as the other side of the universe. But today, its message is here, right in our midst. During the Boxer Rebellion, 236 Western missionaries and 23,000 Chinese Christians were killed. In the following 50 years, more Western missionaries came to China. They established 19 universities, over 6,000 elementary schools and high schools, and more than 900 hospitals. The number of Chinese Christians grew to 700,000. The Chinese Communist Party believed this success was the result of imperialist cultural invasion. They expelled all Western missionaries, forced Chinese missionaries to renounce their religion, and mandated a secular education for all Chinese. "50 more years have passed, and today there are approximately 70 million Christians in China, an increase of 100-fold. Three missionary leaders were born around the time the blood of Christian martyrs was shed in the Boxer Rebellion: Mingdao Wang, John Sung, and Watchman Nee. Mingdao Wang was born in Beijing in 1900. At age 20, he began his work as an evangelist. At 27, he established Spiritual Food Quarterly. In 1955, he was imprisoned for refusing to renounce his faith. While in prison, weakened by intense interrogation and torture, he was forced to sign a statement renouncing his faith. After his release, Mingdao Wang could not find inner peace. He gave himself up to the authorities and went back to jail with his wife, this time for life. 20 years later, in 1977, Mrs. Wang was released. Mingdao Wang would rather die than accept his release, but 2 years later the government tricked him into leaving.
Although I live in darkness, the Lord is my light. I want to endure his wrath because I offended him.
Mingdao Wang and his wife passed away in 1991 and 1992. John Sung was born in 1901. In 1926, he studied in America and received his PhD in chemistry, and then went on to the Union Theological Seminary of New York. The president of the seminary thought Sung was crazy. He was locked up for 193 days. In the asylum, Song read the Bible 40 times. Later, on his way back to China, Song threw a golden key into the Pacific Ocean. It was the symbol of his PhD. In the following 17 years, John Sung, known as Crazy Song, spread the gospel like wildfire across China and Southeast Asia. In 1944, when he was 43 years old, Song passed away. Watchman Nee was born in 1902. From the time he was 28, he wrote a great deal both in Chinese and English. In Shanghai, he established a church known as the Local Small Group Church, and soon this form of church spread across the country. In 1952, he was convicted of counter-revolutionary activities and was imprisoned in Baimaoling jail. He died suddenly in 1972, just before the end of his prison term. All these men who were born during the Boxer Rebellion later became founders of Chinese Christian churches. During the late 20th century, no matter how fiercely the storms of persecution raged, Christianity could no longer be uprooted from China as it was in the Tang, Ming, and Qing dynasties. Instead, the faith flourished. It had grown too strong to be suppressed. From Matteo Ricci, Robert Morrison, and Hudson Taylor to the Boxer martyrs of 1900, the seeds planted by the life and blood of thousands of Western missionaries finally had sent down deep roots into this harsh and ancient land. The Chinese Communist Party members who took control of mainland China in 1949 were die-hard atheists. Although the Constitution acknowledges freedom of religion, the Communist Party's covert goal is to limit, transform, and eventually eliminate religions. From 1949 to 1953, at least several thousand Christians were killed. Tens of thousands were imprisoned. While these horrors were happening, Premier Zhou Enlai invited Wu Yaotsung to a number of meetings. They launched the Three Self-Patriotic Movement. It urged Christians to join the government-controlled Three Self Church, which advocated self-governance, self-support, and self-propagation. Its aim was to put Christians under the complete control of the Communist Party.
I was imprisoned because I refused to join the Three Self-Patriotic Movement.
I love my country very much. My students are the best pianists in China. Some even went abroad to perform, and they were well received everywhere. I didn't break any laws. But the government wanted to denounce me anyway. The real reason was that I spread the gospel and refused to join the Three Self Church.
I
was a good friend of Wu Yaozong, the leader of the Three Self movement, but I was surprised when he asked me to be part of the leadership. I refused, even though I knew my refusal would lead me to prison and labor camp. I considered all the consequences. Sure enough, on the evening of May 28, 1956, people from the police and public security came to take me away. On September 14, 1955, I was sent to prison for the first time. 16 months I spent there. In 1958, I was sentenced to 20 years. I wasn't released until 1978. The first time I was sent to jail was in 1960. The main charge was my refusal to join the Three Self movement.
Why would these evangelists rather be imprisoned than join the government-controlled Three Self Church?
We believe that Jesus is the head of the church, not any person or organization. Politics and religion should be separate. When you try to integrate them, the church deteriorates and can become a political tool.
They also had serious questions about the faith of Wu Yaotsung and other leaders of the Three Self Churches.
One day during a dinner conversation, I asked Wu Yaozong what he thought about the miracles performed by Jesus. He said he had rejected those long ago.
就是吴耀松和丁光训都是
Wu Yaozhong and Ding Guanchun, they both belonged to a faction which we called the non-believers group. We refused to join them because we felt they didn't have faith.
Within 10 years, almost all the evangelists who refused to join the Three Self Church were imprisoned or put into labor camps. Madame Yang Xinfei was one of them. She graduated from the Shanghai Music Academy in 1957 and was 27 when arrested. She spent 20 years in jail. The night she was arrested, her father was very ill.
My dad was already in bed. I went to say goodbye to him. I also asked for my mother. We always pray before leaving home. There was one policeman standing guard beside her, and another one beside me. My mother prayed to the Lord, begging him to take care of me. Have mercy on my daughter. Let her live peacefully and bring her back safe and sound. May the Lord be with her. Then I left home and went to the labor camp.
During this harsh winter of faith, the land was frozen and bleak, but the weak did not die. Underneath the ice and snow, seeds were struggling to take root, waiting for spring to come.
我是在监狱服刑啊。
I was in jail for 21 years and 8 months in Heilongjiang province near the former Soviet Union. It was extremely cold there and a lot of people died. But you know, all those years I never got sick. Not only did I survive, I wasn't sick a single day. So I know God still has work for me to do.
The hardest part was that all the women criminals were locked up in one room, and it was too noisy to sleep. I also need to pray every day, or I can't sleep. So I waited until they all fall asleep, and I crept up out of bed and knelt and prayed to God. Every night was like this until I left the labor camp.
I had to pull the blankets over my head and pray. There was no Bible, but a hymn stayed with me. You know the one? The Old Rugged Cross.
我要高去宣扬主是家。
So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
十字架可换公义冠冕。
I sang it over and over to keep my spirits up.
The path of the cross was paved with humiliation and suffering. For those who chose to walk this path, every step was taken with blood and tears.
我是23年度的这样长的时间。
I was in jail for 23 years. If they had told me that it would last 23 years, I don't think I would have made it. When they held a public meeting to criticize and denounce me, they asked, "Do you still believe in God? Do you still believe in Jesus?" They pulled my hair and my ears. They punched me, knocked me to the ground, and kicked me. And they jerked my handcuffs and asked, "Do you believe? Do you still believe?" The handcuffs had made deep gouges in my flesh, which had started to fester. They hauled me away like this, back and forth, but I prayed to the Lord. I have followed you as far as I can. Surely you're not glorified when they denounce and torture me each day. I'm your servant and your child. Are you glorified in heaven when suffering like this? In prayer, I entrusted my whole family to the Lord. Then I was ready to kill myself. But how could I do it with handcuffs on? When the two guards went for lunch, I jumped onto the bed and unscrewed the light bulb. I planned to kill myself with an electric shock. But the electricity wasn't strong enough. Later, people told me it was because I had handcuffs on. The handcuffs diverted the electricity and saved me. While I was in the middle of doing this, people from outside noticed and shouted, "Moses Shea wants to kill himself." The government officials called me out and lectured me. "You want to threaten the government? You want to make the government look bad by killing yourself?" At night, I confessed to God. I said, "Heavenly Father, I have fallen short of your glory. I have made it through 12 years of labor camp and endured a lot of suffering. Why couldn't I rely on you till the very end? I am not worthy of your glory. Please forgive me, O Lord." Then I heard the Lord speak to me, "Dear child, my grace is sufficient for you. Dear child, my grace is sufficient for you." And the third time he spoke so very gently, "My grace is sufficient for you." The Lord comforted me, and by his grace I survived.
While thousands of Christians suffered in prison for the sake of the cross, the storm outside the jails grew even stronger. After 1958, the government closed down many churches in the name of unifying them. Of the 66 churches in Beijing, only 4 remained open. In Shanghai, 8 of 204 were left open. And in Guangzhou, only 1 of the original 52 was left. All of a sudden, it seems that the Chinese church was withering. In 1966, when the Cultural Revolution started, the Chinese Christian church faced extermination. Priests were denounced, churches were destroyed, believers' homes were confiscated, and Bibles were burned. Even the 3 self-churches did not escape. Chairman Mao's wife claimed that Chinese Christianity was finished and belonged in the History Museum.
Everywhere you went, there were Red Guards. Everywhere you went, there were armed radicals. Everywhere, they interrogated you. Many faithful believers shed tears in secret while they waited and waited for light to come.
I remember clearly, on June 16, 1966, the largest poster they put out read, "Down with the imperialist running dog, missionary Zhang Yupei." I said, "I cannot change my belief in Jesus." They replied, "You stubborn idiot, go see your God." All the students came to the meeting, criticized and denounced me. From then on, they locked me in a cowshed.
I remember watching a Christian standing on a platform. They denounced him and called him a ringleader of superstitious people. There was an elderly sister in our area, and when she got on the platform, she called out, "Believe in Jesus. Do not fear death."
I was convicted of counter-revolutionary activities because of my faith in Jesus. I was forced to parade through the streets. They often held public meetings to denounce me. My whole family suffered the same thing, just because they were related to me.
Many churches were shut down. Missionaries were arrested or forced to wear tall dunce caps. Their hands were painted black, and they were forced to parade through the streets. Church life was completely destroyed.
At the same time, an idol landed on God's altar. When Mao Zedong stood overlooking Tiananmen Square and waved to the fanatic masses below, it seems that he had captured the heart and soul of everyone in China.
Dear Chairman Mao, we promise you we will be the successors of the working class revolutionary mission. We will follow you and carry out revolution.